Welcome to Live from Plato's Cave. I am Mario Veen. This is episode 38b, Money Creation with Anne Kervers. So this is part 2 of our conversation, but it's also a standalone episode. So if you didn't listen to the first one, that's okay, you can just start with this one. We will start with discussing the A12 blockades of Extinction Rebellion for just a couple of minutes, and then we'll discuss the topic of money creation. This episode was recorded in August, and the blockades that we are discussing took place in September. 9th of September they started, and they blocked the road every day at 12 o'clock for 27 consecutive days, and it was completely peaceful. I don't think anything like that happened before in the Netherlands. Maybe I'm wrong, just let me know. But I can't think of a historical example. And I think these blockades were also quite successful because there was a vote in the Dutch government. Anyway, some steps were taken. But I just wanted to mention this so that it's clear that our conversation took place before these blockades. And there's another reason I mentioned this because if you remember episode 24 with Hannah Prins, I spoke with her also about Extinction Rebellion, and then we were discussing the number of 17.5 billion euros that the Dutch government is spending yearly on fossil subsidies. So by the time that we recorded this episode, the figure had been updated to 30 billion euros, but now, not even 2 months later, the Dutch government has presented their own calculations, and it's between 39 billion euros and 46 billion euros. And chances are that by the time that you hear this, it might be 100 billion euros or something like that. Anyway, the truth is slowly coming out, at least about the fossil subsidies. Yeah, okay, we took a little break, but we were talking a little bit, and I was thinking about, okay, this demonstration is performative, it's very serious, but it's also kind of a play. And why is it so effective? And then we were talking about Plato's allegory of the cave and how sometimes you have to show what they say in writing, right? Show, don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some things that you cannot tell for whatever reason. You cannot put it in research.
Yeah.
A lot of climate scientists are part of Extinction Rebellion or other.
Yeah, Scientist Rebellion. Yeah.
So they're the ones that know what's going on, but they're saying already like, okay, yeah, but we tried writing research papers, we tried going in peaceful, normal demonstrations, but people weren't listening, so we're going to sit there. So I think there's something in there, something deeper in the sense that you're also saying it's not about conveying the perfect message to people that, okay, if we tell it to the people in this way, what's going on, they will go into action. It's something else beyond words.
Yeah, I think, it's performative to say that I am willing to give up my freedom to convey this message. And I think that might be a way for people to get on with climate crisis. But I also think that the disruption, and then you need to help me to get this back to your question, how the disruption makes space for the climate crisis, right? Because we block the road and then the media start writing about climate crisis, whereas otherwise they wouldn't.
I mean, it's like same, I used to be a smoker for many years, and
giving information doesn't help.
It didn't help me quit smoking because I knew how it was bad for me. I knew I should stop. I knew everything, but it wasn't, it's an addiction.
It's a really good comparison. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the disruption maybe turns this question into something existential. And that helps people to break through, the cognitive dissonance or the pluralistic ignorance and to get real.
Yeah.
And to cut the bullshit. And I think that the, amount of the new people, the people that start to join XR in the past year, and specifically the A12 actions, they were able to receive this message. They saw us doing this, and then it became existential for them, I think. And they're like, cut the bullshit, I'm also going to get arrested.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, it conveys something that you cannot express with words,
mm-hmm.
which also depends on authority, you know, like some of the things that we are saying, if they were said by someone else, I think they would have wider resonance. But we don't have the authority, and so we disrupt.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it is also happening that the things that you are saying are also being...
Yes, we notice
repeated.
now that we're
Yeah.
taken more seriously also by news media, and also because, for instance, we're pretty well organized, and so numbers in terms of arrests and stuff like that, we're always really careful with those things, and also editors are much more perceptible to receiving climate science from us now. And I think one thing that you just mentioned before is that there's also a question of power, in the sense that so much misinformation has been spread, and we're up against so much lobby interests and stuff like that.
Yeah, people are now saying, because we have these heat waves, one of the things they're saying is that the meteorologists are using different colors on the weather maps to be alarmist, or that they're using different measure devices, because first they used to measure temperature at the ground level and now 2 meters up. And so that's...
There's always gonna, like, some... And I think it's great that other people are interacting with these people, but I'm just not going to do it. These people will always find a way. Yeah, and I can recognize their feelings of despair.
Yeah. How long have you been with Extinction Rebellion?
Since 2019.
Okay.
Yes.
So 4 years.
Yeah.
And have there been results in the sense, if you evaluate and you look back?
Yeah, for sure. Like, for instance... there's now a citizens assembly coming in the Netherlands, and that really is related. We had in 2020 we did a whole rebellion week where the demand was citizens assembly, and also the biggest pension fund of Europe, who is based in Amsterdam, went out of divested, and this was not a XR action alone. For instance, ABP Fossielvrij had been working on this since 2015, and also other people have been working on it, I think, or maybe I'm wrong. No, I think it was just them. And then at some point XR joined, and we did sit-ins there, and because my pension is also with them, which I don't really expect to receive, but still, I think it's good that they divest. I just cannot see how we are gonna get our pensions, you know, if we're facing like collapse, financial crises are gonna get a lot worse than we've had before. All these stranded assets. Yeah, I'm not counting on it. Let's put it that way. And I think also the growth of the movement now, and you know, us being taken more seriously, people coming around, and I think the fossil fuel subsidies is going to be our biggest success. You know, the problem is, I think, what I mentioned before about, you know, lack of knowledge regarding the importance of activism. There was this professor quotes in The Guardian that said, the history of emancipation is a history of disruption. When I go back to my history books in high school, it's really weird how there was not much focus on the importance of activism. And I think that if people knew the history of activism, they would also be more likely to join us now. So this is also a thing that we've been doing, you know, like so many of the rights that people have been fighting for. And so I also see my activism, you know, as a way to thank for the rights that I enjoy. You know, that I acknowledge that some people fought for the rights that I have, and that I can, if
they did it, then this is your fight.
Yeah, it's like a lineage in a way.
Yeah. And what are the demands of XR?
So our first demand is, in Dutch it's wees eerlijk, but in English, which is be honest, but in English it's tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And then the second one is act now, and in Dutch it's doe wat nodig is, do what's necessary. And the third is a citizens assembly on climate policy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not the fossil fuels is.
And I need to add, we have a fourth, which is actually the zero.
Before
the climate justice
the
demands. Yeah. And the fossil subsidies fits those demands, and also the principles and values that we have.
Yeah. But that's what's written now on the wall.
Yeah.
After the A12.
Yeah. And so I think the beauty of it is that it's really easy for people because it's a no-brainer, you know, like you almost can't be against it. And we really see the VNO-NCW, I should say like the bigger corporations lobby organization is really moving against us. And I think that is only a good thing, you know. It shows that we're hitting where it hurts. But they had this advertisement, and then they recently had this Twitter post where they said, if we end the fossil subsidies, then we need to do, and then all these drama things that are, you know, not true at all.
Yeah, society is going to collapse if you stop.
And the thing is that if we don't do it, society is going to collapse, you know. So it's this upside down world, and they're also really keeping us from talk shows. So they know that if the companies that they represent or that are part of their organization face an XR rebel, they just don't have a leg to stand on, because what they're doing is at odds with, you know, the Paris Agreement. What they're doing is at odds with maintaining a habitable planet. They don't want us to sit across from the table.
I noticed that there's when a lot of times when there's discussion about protests, activists are not there, and rarely scientists are invited. Usually it's politicians or like that.
And why we want a citizens assembly is because the politicians have this 4-year mandate and they need to be re-elected.
Yeah,
and so for them it's much more difficult to make, to formulate this adequate climate policy. And also in France, for instance, they had a citizens assembly on the climate policy, and you saw that the proposals that got from there were so much better than what the government was doing. And then people are sometimes worried that, you know, citizens assembly, then it's just going to be the loudest voices in the room and the people who are privileged because these other people don't have time to take off work. But it's really much more designed than that, in the sense that it's like there's a representation of the society is ensured. And it's also, there's this random group that gets into the mix. And then out of that random group, there's a representation of society, and then there's moderators to ensure that everyone gets speaking time and everyone can bring their own experts into the room, and there's, you know, again then discussion, and all these people are compensated. So it also had been proven very useful with for instance abortion rights in Ireland and gay marriage, I think, also there.
Yeah, so this is going to happen now, and this is what you attribute to the XR protests.
Well, I mean, there's also the Bureau Burgerberaad who worked really hard on it. But we definitely had a role to play here,
So the demand of the protests, at least on the banners, is stop fossil fuels, subsidies.
Yeah.
Not stop fossil fuels, but subsidies. And, you know, we were talking about the tragedy of the horizons, and this is a banker, basically, who was speaking about that. And I never really thought that much about the role. Why is this? I mean, if you only have a few words, you want to have one message, right? Why is it stop fossil fuel subsidies? Why is that the most important thing?
I'm not sure if it's the most important thing, but I think it's evidently a no-brainer. And so it's really easy to get people behind. And I also think it's a very important thing.
Yeah.
Because it ensures, like, so the Dutch government is spending 30 billion a year on fossil fuel subsidies, and it's really keeping the system that is killing us in place. And it's only the climate budget in the Netherlands is around 7 billion, and like the subsidies for the renewables are 3 billion. Mm-hmm. So they are saying that they're doing climate policy, but their foot is on the brake, like much harder than they're pressing the speed. So I think evidently this is something that public money shouldn't be going to.
Where should it be going?
I think this is the beauty of the third demand, that people sometimes say that we are not democratic. And I think that civil disobedience is a fundamental part of a democracy. And also we're very democratic in the sense that we're not saying what needs to be happening. We're just raising the alarm bell to ensure that other people start doing what's necessary and to ensure that people know about the urgency of the crisis.
Yeah.
So we're not saying what needs to be happening.
No, you're just saying what needs to stop.
yeah. Well, and I think that, this demand is a bit of an exception to that. But in a way, I think all the people who join the protest are, despairing about the climate crisis, not necessarily only about the fossil fuel subsidies.
I never really thought that much about money. I mean, money is really, for me, something that my goal is not to have to think about it.
Yeah.
So of course, I think about it if I don't have enough, but if I have enough money to just like do basic things, and I'm not that interested in it. And I like one of the reasons is that I think if you look in Plato's cave, what are the things that are, like if you think about science, you can think about, well, this may be about shadows on the wall, but it's maybe connected to something deeper, And with money, I just have the feeling it's just something we made up to say that a piece of paper has value or a coin has value. And I don't see it has any connection to something like actual real or something.
Yeah.
But the truth is that this is a lazy excuse because I stopped thinking about it. And I actually found out in one of your papers, you quote someone else that there's a term for this, what is it? Monetary silencing?
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
I think that most people never start thinking about money. They just assume it to be there. And I was definitely one of those people. I studied economics and I didn't question money back then. It was only when I started working at Triodos Bank and had this meeting and kind of accidentally stumbled up on that Triodos Bank also created money. And I thought it was only the big banks who created money and that we only did this thing where, what it's called, an intermediary. So the bank converts savings into loans. And my colleague explained to me how money creation works. And it's so simple, but it's kind of took me 2 or 3 meetings because I was like, no, it can't be that simple and easy. And I think what monetary silencing is about is, which is another term, or another way to put it is the depoliticization of money. And so, as you said, like to disconnect money from material stuff, and because how we create money has distributive consequences. So so what we pick as money and how that gets created and how it gets distributed really has material effects. And I think you really describe it nicely. Often you will hear people say that money is just an intermediary or money is neutral. And I think that idea and are examples of monetary silencing. And actually, Jacob Feinig, this is his term. He has a really nice definition in the book that I don't know by heart, but it's something like when people do not connect their money to political action, do not see, and he puts it somewhere else nicely. He says, when people discuss rights, they no longer discuss money creation. And previously, this has been the case. And it's kind of this flow throughout history where money gets politicized and depoliticized.
Yeah, but that's pretty much describing me because that's how I relate to money. I think I did some economy in high school, but it's going as far as that I know that first you had bartering, so just changing goods.
And so this is false.
Okay.
And I just remembered it better. It's something like that people don't relate to money as political agents. And I think I just said political action, right? But this whole idea of this, okay, so there is this, the former chief economist of the ECB, of the European Central Bank, Peter Praat, he did this speech a few years ago where he says and he even makes a disclaimer in the beginning, like, it's not exactly like this, but I'm just going to do it anyway. Yeah. And this is a trick that economists pull more often. And he says, there was this entrepreneur and there was this barter economy, and then he found these shells and they were durable and there were also a couple of them And then they found out it just saved time, that they could use the shells instead of finding an exact one-on-one exchange for the goods that they had.
Yeah, so the shell stands for, I don't know, a chicken or something, because it's easier to carry a shell around than a chicken. If I give you the shell, then...
But also 10 shells stands for a chicken, and then something else stands for 5 shells, and you don't need to cut your chicken. You can just exchange 5 shells for whatever, stuff like that. And
so you start to quantify the world.
Yeah, but the funny thing with this is, if you ask an economist, okay, cool, when did this happen? They can never answer you. Why? Because there is no historical data. There's no historical empirical data that this actually happened. And there is historical evidence for a whole other way in which money came into the world. And that is in Sumer, you had a pretty hierarchical society where debts were kept track of through a kind of a ledger. And for instance, you also have the Felix Martin, economist, who says that money is the immaterial keeping track of each other's debts. And when it becomes physical, that is the currency, I think he says. And back then in Sumer, so that was kind of the money system. And then the stuff that you could pay with would vary a lot. So it could be lapis lazuli, this mineral. It could be a sheep. It could be whatever. And so there was this system. Yeah. So I was interrupting you because you said the thing about barter.
Yeah. So instead of saying, well, one person has a couple of mangoes, the other one has a chicken, they change. That's barter. Yeah. But there are two things, and you exchange the one for the other. And then you say after a while, well, mangoes, you can only keep them for so long. That's use seashells, and the seashells stands for this and that. That's like the official story. Yeah,
it's a story that the financial authorities tend to tell, and
that's what they tell. That's the model. But then you say, well, another historical example is where it's not like I have mangoes and you have a chicken. But I want to buy your chicken. I want to have chicken, and you give it to me, and you write down, I gave you a chicken. Yeah. So in the future, I must give you something back. Yeah. So rather than changing two things.
And so you could say that it becomes money as soon as this certificate of he owes me this chicken is expressed in a specific value term. And then that paper starts to circulate.
Because you could, this person, so now you have my paper. But when you want to buy something else, you can give this paper that I gave you that says I owe you something, you give it to someone else.
And that's basically money.
And that's basically money.
Yeah, when that certificates circulate anonymously.
So there is a certain story about money that we have that is being retold in this time, which at least can be criticized.
Yeah, where for which no empirical evidence exists. And I think that it contributes, this shell thing contributes to the idea that money existed prior to humans, and that gives it a certain natural quality. And that helps also to depoliticize it. Mm-hmm. Because you're not getting angry when it rains. I mean, by now maybe you do because of the climate crisis, but like previously when humans were not interacting, or I should say Westerners were not fucking up our ecosystems. We're not influencing the climate, you wouldn't get angry with rain because that's just the way it happened. And so having little money is just like a cloud, You
can't do anything about it. Yeah, I learned something now, because basically I was just saying, the barter thing, I wanted to get to somewhere else. We didn't get there yet. But so the barter thing is already not the way it's, because this is what I learned in economy class as well. Yeah.
And then there's even people writing that these barter situations come about when people who are used to money no longer have money, and they start to barter. But before that, it was much more this taps kind of society.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, also because, for instance, it was much more relied a lot more on the harvest. For instance, like in the harvest, people suddenly would have a lot more to spend because they harvested their crops.
So they want to sell their crops then, and they want to get something back that they can use.
Yeah, and before that it was much more tabs, and so that was when the tabs were settled.
Yeah. I have to think about this more, but I'm really interested in this concept of justice, which we just talked about. Plato's Cave is part of the Republic, and it's all about what is justice.
Yeah.
And one of the translation of justice is in Greek is having one's own.
Okay.
So you have what's yours, I have what's mine, but more like it belongs to you. It doesn't mean like you want to have it because it doesn't belong to you and now it belongs to you, but it always already belonged to you.
Yeah, and I think that, this natural idea of money, also, gold a few centuries ago, is also in the interest of the wealthy, because it's easier for them to claim that what they have is what they deserve. It's a representation of their contribution. Feinig also makes a nice analysis of this in his book, Moral Economies of Money. And I think approaching money as a political question, or more specifically, money creation or monetary arrangements, all puts all those things into question.
So that this was even the first step. So the second step I remember is that, or maybe the second and third step is that, okay, let's say we had seashells or something like that. After a while, it became something like gold or diamond. And then they made coins, and then you knew, oh yeah, this coin, like because of the stamp of the king or whatever is on there, this coin is this big, so it has this value, and a smaller coin has less value. So the gold itself was valuable, and that was the value that was bartered. And then the next step was that people didn't use gold coins anymore, but the bank has a reserve of gold. So if they had like $1 million or whatever, they would need a value of $1 million worth of gold in their reserves. So it was kind of decoupled, like the banknote is not a value, but you know that if, in theory, you could go to the bank and get that value of gold.
Yeah. I think this is also the financial authorities' narrative, and it also has this modern take on it, money getting more complex and abstract throughout time, and now we're at kind of the height of the development of money. And I think, for instance, David Graeber's book, that is very insightful with regards to how money creation changed both throughout time and in different places. So it's not like this linear development of something, but things were invented in China, then started happening in another place, then they went away because there was a crisis or, a change of power, or for instance, the Dark Ages. And then new things come up. So for instance, I think in the 18th century, or even maybe still the 19th century in the States, there were places where 6,000 different currencies were circulating. Mm-hmm. And the Bank of England, which was kind of the first central bank as they exist today, was founded in 1694. So the way we organize money today is relatively recent. Yeah. So it's not set in stone. And that is, gives me energy because we can change it again.
Because it has been changing already.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's really complex question, but so can you explain me how, so my idea is if I borrow 100 euros from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have, let's say you have 1,000 euros, I borrow 100 euros. So then you have 900 euros.
Yeah.
But then I pay it back to you after a month with some interest, and then you have like 1,010 euros or something. And I have to get that 10 extra euros somewhere else or whatever. I do some job or something. But basically, and I also know that the central bank can create money because not all the money is connected to the amount of gold anymore, but you still need
it's not connected. Yeah.
So my story was there was still like maybe 10% needs to be. So that's okay. That's out of the window already.
Yeah.
But still, my idea was then, okay, then the government introduces this amount of money in society that can circulate.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna, I think, so that all of that is not true.
Okay, good.
And if people do not believe me, they can go to this. I'll explain it. And if you want to reread it or do not believe me, then there's this really great article by the Bank of England from 2014. It's called Money Creation in the Modern World. I think it repeats it's very similar. So when speaking for the European Monetary Union, the EU gives the mandate to create money to the central bank, to the ECB. So money creation is double entry bookkeeping. So banks always have a balance. And when you enter the same amount to both sides of the balance, you create money. And this just happens in a computer, and it's just a number and then enter.
And central bank, that's the government.
No, so the ECB is separate from the government.
Yeah.
That is also very important to them. It's called central bank independence.
Right.
And so this ECB
but
was...
they're supposed to be kind of a neutral institution in
Yes.
the society.
Yes.
Yeah. They're not there to make a profit.
Well, that's not to be said. They're not there to perform the government's policies. And this was devised in the 92 Maastricht Treaty. Yeah, that this independence or central bank neutrality, you can also refer to it, actually means that they act, that their actions, that their monetary policy actions are always market neutral. So that they don't benefit a certain market, and by market I mean the index. They
can have policies and interventions, but they're not supposed to influence the market. So they have to be neutral. It cannot be that they do something and the shares of one company go up.
And market is all the stock listed companies in this case. I think it's always really important to define market. The term gets used all the time. And, when you go to economic theory, market is defined as both consumers and suppliers having no effect on the price. Yeah. And so there rarely you can say, okay, and this is then a competitive market, but that rarely happens. And I think economics really lacks in an analysis of power, how that's always, power as an explanatory factor is always missing. But so that's another story. So the ECB actually does not create a lot of money. So they produce the central bank reserves, which are only accessible for commercial banks. And the ECB provides institutions, banks, with a banking license, and that allows them to create a claim on legal tender. Oh yeah, that's important. So they create central bank reserves, and they create also legal tender, which is the payment that cannot be refused as means of payment, which are notes and coins. Mm-hmm. So the money in your wallet. All the other money that you have in your bank account is a claim on legal tender, and it's created by commercial banks when they make a loan. And so it's not the case that the government sets the amount of money at all. The ECB has influence over the amount of money that gets created by the commercial banks through their monetary policy. But then we also saw sometimes that's referred to as pushing a string, because it's limited. Yeah, so this was my intervention of the...
Wow, my previous episode was about Bernard Stiegler's philosophy.
Yeah.
I think this stuff is more complicated, at least for me. But because my question was very simple, because if I borrow 100 euros from you, I could just keep it for a month and then give it to you back, maybe with some interest. That's very easy to understand, right? Because you have something, then you don't have it, then you get it back with a little bit extra.
Yeah.
But then how does it work when I take out a loan from the bank? I imagine they would have a lot of money and they would give it to me, and then they would have a little bit less until I give it back.
No, so they just create new money.
Yeah, so that's the thing I read it in your paper, but I don't understand that. So I borrow, let's say, 1,000 euros because
it's a bank.
And then there's 1,000 euros extra created out of nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
But how does that?
Yeah. So this is also what took me a couple of hours, but it's just created by adding the same amount of money to both sides of the bank's balance, and that really there's nothing more to it. And I remember feeling as if really a rock was pulled away from me, like not a rug, but really a rock. Because this thing that you always use and that you always trust and that you assume to be stable, suddenly you realize, oh, it's plastic in a way, right? Like it's not a stable thing at all, actually.
Like the shadows in Plato's cave, right?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
One of the things about the climate crisis and what do we need to do and stopping fossil fuel subsidies, the thing you hear most often, if you are beyond the science denial and beyond all that stuff, you're like, yeah, but it's just unrealistic because the economy will collapse.
And I think what is very important is that a public approval. Okay, so before I go into the public approval, a very important thing is that the ECB ensures that the claims on legal tender created by a commercial bank, so that is all the money in your bank account, they always exchange on par, so one-on-one with legal tender. So when you go to an ATM and you request an amount of money, 10 euros goes off your bank balance and you have 10 euros cash in your hand. Yeah. And this is ensured by the ECB. And
so in that case, money is not created.
Well, okay, the other money first got the claims on legal tender got created in the first place. But yes, when you withdraw money at an ATM, it's not created because it gets destroyed from your balance sheet. From your bank account.
Going back to the barter that's my fundamental understanding of economics, that I know that sometimes you can, create money or do something like that. But in principle, it's like if I give something to you, I don't have it anymore and you have it. Yeah. Not I give something. That sounds very positive. How do you say that? That's Dutch, like delen is vermenigvuldigen. It's sharing and dividing is the same word in Holland. So dividing is multiplying. Yeah. So what they say about love, if you give love to somebody, you create. But it sounds like it's the same way with money in certain circumstances.
I think there is not an infinite amount of money. For instance, there's this modern monetary theory school that says that the amount of money production is determined by the production capacity of a society. And they really argue for money creation staying with the government. And I'm not so sure. I just haven't gone. I'm just more busy right now with my problem analysis to start saying anything about solutions yet. But in a way, I do agree with. Let me put it differently. Money creation is mobilizing resources, and a society can determine how they want to mobilize resources. And right now, so money really relies on so much public infrastructure. And in that sense, the fact that banks get to keep all their profits is a bit questionable because, I think it's similar to water companies keeping all their profits because they're just taking something from the earth, or oil companies for that matter. They're just taking something from the earth and they're not necessarily adding a lot to it. Yeah. Okay, with oil and with water, they're also doing something. And it's the same with banks. They're drawing on this resource that is a public resource, namely money. David Graeber has a nice definition of money. He says, money is anything that you expect to get accepted by someone else in the future. So it really relies on this. It's really a public question. And then it's also how it's organized, through the parliament, to the ECB. It's also a lot of public infrastructure. So the fact that today monetary arrangements do not work in the interest of the people is a really big issue. So, for instance, since the Paris Agreement, so billions have been created for the fossil fuel industry only. And that hasn't only taken place through money creation, which is lending, also through other forms of finance. But money creation is about 50% of it. So that's huge.
Yeah, I think I have to do another episode entirely about money but I'm just trying to understand some basics now. Yeah. So as I try to summarize, then you're saying money is inherently political. Yeah. And money creation is a thing. It's a big thing. Yeah. And it has to do with political choices where for what reasons, who can create money and for what. And it hasn't been like this for a very long time. So even the fundamental things that people say, but this is how money works. Yeah. Yeah, but they're constructions in a way. And they're consequential constructions because they have huge consequences, of course. But so you're saying that all those things now are happening already, but they're happening in part also to subsidize fossil fuels, which is
to finance fossil
fuels, and basically to a lot of other things that we know that like the record heat temperatures that we're getting at this moment. It's not just saying that, oh, we're now in the climate crisis because we get these temperatures and it might still rise more. No, we're actually adding fuel to the flames because there's only more and more fossil fuels being taken out of the ground. And we know already that any fossil fuels extra out of the ground will overshoot everything.
Exactly.
So money is a very important part of this whole problematic, right?
Well, I think it's often overlooked as a policy instrument to accomplish the Paris Agreement or to close the climate finance gap. And so I would never say that changing monetary arrangements is the solution, is a silver bullet, but I think it's often overlooked, and that really has to do with depoliticization of money, so that the political and normative consequences of money creation as it exists today are not known to people.
And do you have an idea that it could, because the energy transition, that it's going to be very costly, right? Just if you think about cities, right? On the long term, cities have to be sustainable cities. Mm-hmm. That means that you have to build a lot of new structures. You have to, so that all takes a lot of, on a global scale.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, isn't there a way that because people are now talking about geoengineering, which is quite ironic because I was talking to you before about this conference I was at where it was about sustainability. There were no climate scientists, and one person had this presentation about geoengineering because he said, basically the best way would be if we would stop burning fossil fuels. But let's be realistic, people are not going to do that. So geoengineering is the next best thing, and we just have to get the whole world to agree about, changing cloud structures, which, by the way, it's completely unrealistic, but I talked about that before. But basically, it's saying, what if we had a proposal that the whole world could get behind? Saying, this is in all our interest. Let's say it's geoengineering if it would work, right? If it would solve the climate crisis for sure.
Yeah.
So then I was thinking, if there's such a thing as money creation, isn't there a way that we could have geoengineering, but monetary engineering, where just the whole budget needed to fund the transition?
Yeah, so Henry Ford said, if people understand how money works today, there would be a revolution tomorrow.
Okay.
And I have this project, it's called Unmuting Money. Mm-hmm. And it's about, so it's something that I rarely get to because of the PhD and then climate activism. It's kind of my third on my list. So it doesn't get the attention that I would like to give to it. But it's about, making these the political and normative dimensions of monetary arrangements known to the wider public. And I think that since the financial crash, there has the scholarship on the topic of money and money creation has really taken up. So there's this really nice book by Stefan Eich. It's called The Currency of Politics, and it's actually starts with Aristoteles and is a history to today of philosophers on the topic of money. And he really shows nicely how there has been this wave, this depoliticization and politicization of money. And it's the same with the book by Jacob Weinig, also how money got politicized and depoliticized. So yes, I think that right now we're starting to, since the financial crash, the politicization of money is growing. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I would like to spend more time thinking on is how can these insights help us if, when shit hits the fan, when the climate crisis gets really bad and we really have I really can imagine that. So for instance, right now the ECB is doing some climate action because it's important for price stability. So they are requiring commercial banks to disclose and price risks. And they think that through that, there's going to be an allocation of new money, so lending that is in line with the Paris Agreement. And well, I don't really expect that to be sufficient anytime soon. And also when you look into the regulation, there is no punishments for not meeting the requirements. It is a yearly meeting, maybe with some strong words, and then that's that.
Just like the IPCC conferences.
Yes, I think, but the difference is that the ECB has a responsibility for the financial system to stay stable.
Yeah.
And so, and for instance, if you would make a comparison with the IPCC, they don't necessarily have, they don't hold anything over the countries, I think. Yeah. But the ECB does have a responsibility to ensure that these commercial banks are future-proof. Yeah.
You know what? If you're willing, I could read one of these books and we could discuss them in the next episode, because I think it's too much to get into everything now.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me in the same way that I think like one of the most things we need now is lawyers.
Yes.
To get things done in the climate crisis, we need
lawyers.
And
I heard in your previous with, I think, Aaron Cherry, who said that there's now lawyers who are resisting to prosecute climate activists, and I was so happy to hear it. And that would be such a good thing also here in the Netherlands.
In the Netherlands, because I saw some of the Openbaar Ministerie, the public prosecutor yesterday, who was prosecuting peaceful climate activists. But also the language they were using was like a lot of the same language you get in your Twitter feed.
Exactly.
But you just came back from winter sports and
crazy,
you're hypocritical and all.
It's crazy. I think Lucas put it nicely, one of the defendants, that, it's insane the energy that they're putting into prosecuting us compared to, the way that they're prosecuting Shell for how they fucked up Groningen with their gas operations.
Are you ever worried that engaging in civil disobedience like you do, that it might have consequences for you, like long term? Like you work at the university, you want a career.
There's not much of a career if I don't do it. And of course, I could kind of free ride and it might take a while. And yes, I worry about it, is the honest answer, instead of the, smart reply. But I worry more about climate change and yes, I was going to the nature area this afternoon, and I was really noticing that, some days the climate crisis weighs heavier on you than other days. And I was really noticing that it was really weighing heavy on me. And I have this friend who not even thinks of the climate crisis every day, like once a week maybe. And I just cannot imagine how nice that would be. Because my work is on climate crisis and then the activism, and so it's kind of always there. This is also really why I didn't read the book yet. Because you really need to unload it's not even your brain, but your whole body once in a while too.
Because you cannot be in a crisis the whole time.
No, at least I cannot. So yes, I worry about all those things, and I really don't like putting myself at risk. It's really nice that I was for a very long time the only person in my department who was doing civil disobedience, who was, doing climate activism. And then half a year ago, a colleague joined, and now another colleague joined, and maybe 2 others are also joining for the September protests. But it's really,
It's a struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also feel now I have like a more permanent contract again. But before I was first on this 1 year PhD contract, and then only after I submitted a paper, I got like more years. And I really remember being careful with what I was saying on Twitter. And now I know that it's not so easy for me to get fired.
Yeah.
But
I recognize that. I feel I have a new job that's starting soon, and I know that I can be more free to express myself in social media and everything like that.
And I think there's just not a neutral position, and I just keep pushing myself to put myself in uncomfortable positions. Also, when I was at these conferences, at each conference, I proposed that I would do a climate talk, or not even a climate talk. I just wanted to say, when so many academics get together, I just wanted to say, because I know that I learned from activism that all things start small. So if I could do like a 2-minute thing on Scientist Rebellion, maybe one new group would start in a month. I think the most important thing if you want to start taking action is find like-minded people. So go to a meeting and, you'll always find someone to get along with. Always someone will take you on board. And it just makes everything so much easier when you do it together. And at the first conference, the organizer said, we want to keep it scientific. And I really don't like proposing these things because I'm always scared that people will reject what I was talking about in the beginning. Yeah. And I remember being at this Sustainable Finance Lab meeting a year ago, and the minister who was in charge of the fossil subsidies was there, and then there was room for questions, and so I stood up and I asked this question, because I wanted to ask this question, and I was so afraid of what the people in the room would think about me, because they all might be my future employer. They're all people from academia and the financial sector, and I was so afraid. But then when I'm holding back because of these kinds of considerations, I always remember this clip that I saw during the forest fires in Australia in 2018. There were these koalas. So they were in the top of the trees, and they were screaming on the top of their lungs because they knew they were gonna burn. Yeah. And so always when I'm scared, I think back to then, and I hear the screeching, and then what I am doing is not that scary anymore. And and that is for me a way to push myself, because Roger Helen put it nicely last week. He said in a conference call with a group of Dutch activists, he said, in 10 years we're all gonna regret that we didn't do more today, regardless of what we do. And I really think that is true. And also I know that, but it's also soothing in the sense that whatever you do, it's not going to be enough. But I really want to, so with the burnout, you really learn to get to know your physical boundaries. And so I really want to be on the, maybe verge is the right way to put it. I don't know, but to be on the verge of my physical boundaries within my, what is physically possible for me. I want to try to do what I can, and you can always do more. And I admire so many people who are taking much more adequate action than I am taking. Pushing myself in these kinds of situations it just breaks the, what Chris also discussed in his episode with you, the pluralistic ignorance, that everyone is thinking that the others don't care, but everyone cares. They're just not talking about it. And breaking through that silence is scary, but very important.
Because we didn't mention it yet, but you're on the, let's say, the exit of burnout, right? Yeah. The last stages. So you had a burnout. You know what? I think actually probably this is enough, and I hope we can discuss another time.
Yeah.
And it would be great to speak about more in depth about money,
Yeah.
like where can we go, because that's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And also burnout, because I don't think I had a burnout. I think I was almost there, but but maybe just to close off, because I know many people are struggling with this. Sometimes people say like, why do young people, why are they so concerned with climate and busy with it all the time? They get problems because of that, they get stressed, but actually they get stressed because of the inaction, right? So, but did you learn anything that you could maybe, I'm going to ask you two things. Like, did you learn anything about how to keep it healthy for yourself, for people who are listening to that, who, also busy with this, maybe with burnout? And the other one is like, why should people come on the 9th of September?
Okay, yeah. Well, the first thing is I think it's a couple of things, but one of them is get very clear for yourself what your priorities are. So I now sometimes think, maybe this is also because I'm researching money, but I now sometimes think of my energy levels as my bank account. And with my bank account, it's very clear when I reach the end of my bank account. And with your energy levels, it's sometimes not that clear. So I really carefully think about, how do I want to spend my energy? And then I also really stick to it. And one of the very concrete ways that I do it is that I have both on my computer, on my laptop, and my mobile phone, I have this app blocker. So I really no longer spend a lot of time on when I work. I really work. I really don't do Twitter when I work. Yeah. So that I finish my work in time to after that go to Twiske, my favorite nature spot.
You learn to focus your attention and not waste your attention as a form of energy on social media or something when you're doing something, and then you do energy creation.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So today I didn't have my blocks carefully, and then before I knew it, I spent 1.5 hours on my computer, and I was really like, that's really, and it doesn't happen very often to me anymore. But now I really feel how that's a waste, because I would have much rather spend 1.5 hours more in my nature, or in my nature park, or in the garden that we're very lucky to have. Yeah, so that is one thing. And then this other thing is to switch between focus and relaxation. And like one very simple tip that helped me so much is, well, first of all, this Pomodoro way of working. So where you work for 25 minutes and then I generally close my eyes for 5 minutes. I do a meditation or something. And that really recharges you. And at the end of my working day, I am much less depleted than I otherwise would have been. And then I think walking for an hour a day, now that I'm almost back full time, I don't manage to do that the way I used to, but I still really make an effort to do it as much as possible. It's just very restoring for me. And I think the last thing I would say on the top of my head is a bit more work related, is like for instance, when you're working and you're doing procrastination, to really check in with yourself, why am I not working right now? And I have these notes on my monitor that help me to get through those moments. And the more that you get, and then it becomes more of a habit, and it becomes every time easier. Yeah, so really ask like, oh, why am I procrastinating? What am I afraid of? What am I dreading? And if you make that really concrete, then often you realize, oh, I can handle it. So that was really helpful to me. Yes, why should people come on the 9th of September? We're fucked, and we really need a climate policy now. And it's just not, the government is no longer protecting us, and we really need to stand up to ensure a habitable planet.
I think it's really important, like what you said about the professors, because that professionals come. I'm really interested in this question where people say, like civil servants, for instance, or lawyers or academics, where they say, well, actually, professionally speaking, this is a big thing, and I find it so important that professionally I'm going to be there. Yeah. So that's what I'm hoping for as well. I think that will contribute a lot as well. To not just go there. I mean, you can go there, even if you go there already, you can look, who am I? What is my professional role? Or it doesn't have to be like you can be a professional mother or something, right? Mm-hmm. It can be like, what is my role in society? Yeah. Something that society values. You have even the grandmothers and the grandfathers, and they're there.
Exactly, because there is no neutral position, So if academics or civil servants are not allowed to stand up, then who's going to protect us? The bankers. Yeah, we can't really rely on that. Wow. And then I think if you join, and that's not a motivation, but I think if you'll join, you find that it is also emotionally very restoring. And it's just really nice to be around people where you're not the weird one out. Mm-hmm. And specifically for scientists who worry about their objectivity, Chris always puts it nicely. He says that objectivity is a procedural quality. We also have industry scientists, and it's about, how you do your work, not who you are. And this other consideration is, if you're worried about what people will think of you, if you fast forward 10 years, I think a scientist who participated in these climate actions is going to be taken much more seriously. It's going to be much more credible, acting on the facts.
You were on the side of science. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of not speaking out because most people weren't. I think that there is no neutral position, and there's just the majority is just an unmarked category, right? We are activists, but what are the people who are not coming to the A12? They're not. They also should have a name, I think, so that it becomes a bit clearer that there's no sideline to the climate crisis.
The inactivists.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Well, we don't know, because, I mean, I'd rather have like the person in a boardroom of a huge company change something there and not go to the A12 than the other way around, right? Yeah.
I don't think that everyone needs to be a climate activist. And I think, like the way you do it now with your being an ally is also very valuable. But I say, I think all people should, because eventually I think most people should, right? And I think the amount of people, I get quite a few messages after a demonstration, people saying, oh, well done, I respect it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes, great.
See you next time.
See you next time. And also, or, as you do, write these op-eds or use your position to defend us. And very few people are doing that. And I can understand it's scary. Yeah. But I think that I sometimes say hope is for children, action is for grown-ups, because so many grown-ups are acting like children that the children are going to suffer. And one way to, be a responsible grown-up right now is, to take this serious and really start devoting a part of your time to help prevent untold suffering.
Yeah, and that's what I like about, because you're going actually on the road and maybe get arrested. Then there's the people on the road that, are there, but they don't get arrested. So they go when the police warns them. But then there's all the people just looking and supporting. And
exactly.
I think that's very important as well. That
I think for every person that gets arrested, 4 to 10 people are working behind the curtains, behind this, well, whatever.
But even the people who just show up, they're not part of Extinction Rebellion, but they come there to say, well, I support the cause, and as many people as possible.
Super important.
Yeah.
And but just to say, if you want to join XR, you don't need to get arrested. You can join in so many capacities. You can make food for the people who when they get released from prison. You can help the social media team. You can help the legal team. There's so many things that need to be done. That also, if you want to do it anonymously, you can get an action name. Yeah, so there's no need to get arrested.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation.
Graag gedaan.